The sea outside my window was calm that morning, a flat line of silver stretching toward the horizon, the kind of morning that pretends everything is fine. I remember thinking how still the air felt, how even the waves seemed to hesitate before breaking. Then the phone rang. I wiped my hands on a towel and glanced at the screen. It was my son, Evan. My heart did that quiet leap it always did when his name appeared. I answered with a smile already forming on my lips. "Hi, sweetheart." For a moment, there was silence on the other end. Then his voice came through, strained, careful, unfamiliar. "Mom, we need to talk." A chill passed through me. I had heard that tone before. It was the tone he used as a boy when he had done something wrong, but hoped I would forgive him quickly. "What's wrong, honey?" I asked softly. He hesitated, then said, "Chloe and I have been talking about the wedding." The way he said her name told me exactly where this was going. I pressed the phone closer to my ear, bracing myself. She's been really anxious about everything. You know how much she wants the day to be perfect. "Of course," I said. "Every bride does." "Well," he continued, "Chloe thinks it might be better if you didn't come." The clock on the wall seemed to stop ticking. My breath caught somewhere between my throat and my chest. "Did you just say you don't want me at your wedding?" He spoke quickly, as if rushing through the worst part. "It's not that I don't want you there. It's just that Chloe feels uncomfortable. She thinks your presence might make things awkward. You know, because of the way you and she sometimes clash." I could hear the seagulls outside, crying over the tide. One flew so close to my window that its shadow swept across my face like a moving cloud. "Awkward," I repeated quietly. That's the word she used. "Mom, please don't make this harder," he said. "It's just one day. After the honeymoon, we can have dinner together. It'll be nice." Dinner. After the wedding, I wasn't allowed to see. "I see," I managed to say. My hand trembled, and the phone slipped slightly against my ear. "Thank you for understanding," he said quickly, relief in every syllable. "I knew you'd be reasonable about this. I love you, Mom." The line clicked, and then there was only the sound of waves again. For a long moment, I just stood there, phone still in my hand. The light from the window fell across my kitchen table, touching the white ceramic mug beside me. The tea inside had gone cold. On the refrigerator door hung the wedding invitation, pinned with a small seashell magnet. I had helped address those envelopes myself, because Chloe had said her wrists hurt from typing too much. I crossed the room slowly. The gold lettering shimmered in the morning light. Helen Whitaker and Chloe Summers invite you to join them in celebration of their union at Ocean View Pavilion, Charleston, South Carolina. My name wasn't erased from the invitation, but it might as well have been. I stood there until the letters blurred, until my eyes stung. Then, without a word, I pulled the invitation from the fridge, folded it neatly in half, and tore it in two. The paper made a soft, tearing sound, too soft for what it meant. The two halves fluttered into the trash like white feathers. That was the moment something inside me hardened. It wasn't anger, not yet. It was something colder and deeper. A quiet understanding that after all these years, after every sacrifice, I was no longer welcome in the story I had helped build. I poured the cold tea down the sink and reached for the bottle of Chardonnay I had been saving. My reflection in the window looked older than I remembered. Tired eyes, silver hair pulled back in a loose braid, a face shaped by years of patience. I raised the glass. "To awkward mothers," I whispered. The first sip burned. The second felt easier. By the third, I had made up my mind. I was not going to cry. You see, when you spend decades raising a child on your own, you learn to survive heartbreak quietly. You learn that dignity is sometimes the only thing no one can take from you. That afternoon, I walked to the small wooden shelf beside the couch. On it stood a framed photograph. Evan at 6 years old, missing his front teeth, holding a seashell to his ear while his father laughed behind him. I ran my fingers along the edge of the frame. His father had been gone 27 years. Every decision since then had been mine alone. Every late-night fever, every tuition payment, every hard conversation about right and wrong. And now, my reward for a lifetime of devotion was to be excluded because I made someone uncomfortable. Outside, the tide was rising, whispering against the shore. I sat down at the table, opened my laptop, and stared at the blank screen. My fingers hovered over the keys. I did not know what I was writing yet, only that I needed to reclaim something. My voice, my story, maybe even my son. By the time the sun dipped low, I had written the first words of what would later become a plan, though I didn't realize it then. When you erase a mother, sometimes she finds another way to be heard. I leaned back and exhaled. The seagulls were gone now. The beach had fallen silent except for the hum of the waves. I didn't know it then, but that was the moment everything changed. This was no longer about a wedding invitation. It was about being seen, about proving that a woman like me, 63, widowed, labeled outdated and inconvenient, could still choose to write her own story. And I would. If you have ever felt invisible, if you have ever been quietly pushed out of the life you helped build, stay with me. This story is for you. Welcome to Grandma's Final Chapter, a place where stories of courage, dignity, and second chances come to life. We believe that aging is not about fading into silence, but about reclaiming your power and your joy. If this beginning speaks to your heart, please like this video, subscribe to Grandma's Final Chapter, and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. Because your story matters, and sometimes the endings we never expected become the beginnings we needed all along. The morning after the phone call, Helen woke before dawn. The sky outside her window was still the color of ash, the ocean a restless shimmer of gray. The tide had rolled in overnight, leaving faint trails of seaweed along the sand. She could hear it from her bedroom, the slow, rhythmic pull and crash of waves against the shore. That sound had always been her comfort, a heartbeat bigger than her own, but today it felt heavier, as if the sea itself carried her disappointment. She wrapped herself in her old cardigan and sat by the window. The house was quiet, filled with the faint scent of lavender detergent and salt air. On the nightstand sat a small wooden box, the one she had not opened in years. Inside were fragments of a life she had built piece by piece, an old class photo from her years teaching third grade, a lock of Evan's hair tied with blue ribbon, and a faded wedding picture. She took the photo out carefully, her fingers brushing the edge as if it were glass. The image had yellowed over time, but she could still see herself clearly. She had been 28, standing barefoot on the same beach in Charleston, her dress light as seafoam, her husband Daniel laughing beside her as the wind tangled her hair. He had been the kind of man who believed love could fix everything. That illusion ended one stormy night 27 years ago when the phone rang and a state trooper's voice replaced her husband's laughter forever. The memory came back in flashes, the smell of rain-soaked asphalt, the hollow ache of standing at the morgue, the cold weight of signing her name on a form that said, "Spouse of the deceased." She remembered sitting in the kitchen that night, Evan only 6 years old, asking when his father was coming home. She had promised him then that she would make sure he never felt alone. And she had kept that promise with every breath she took. She worked double shifts at the elementary school, tutoring after hours, grading papers until midnight. There were months she lived on oatmeal and instant coffee just to afford his piano lessons or his school trips. When he wanted to attend college out of state, she sold Daniel's old boat to cover the first semester. When he graduated and found his first job, she surprised him with the down payment for his apartment. All of it, every sacrifice, had been out of love. Now, years later, her son had told her that her presence would make his wedding uncomfortable. She pressed the photograph against her chest and closed her eyes. The ache behind her ribs spread like a bruise. For a moment, she wished Daniel were still here. He would have known what to say, how to ease this strange mixture of anger and heartbreak. But he was gone, and the only sound left was the ocean, patient and unchanging. Helen set the photo on the table and looked around her home. It was a modest house, a single-story cottage with whitewashed walls and sun-faded curtains. Every corner held something she had repaired herself. The cabinet door that used to squeak, the loose tile near the sink, the garden bench Daniel built before he died. This house had grown old with her, but it was hers. The one thing she had earned without apology. Her eyes landed on the fridge again, where only the faint imprint of tape remained from the torn invitation. The absence stung more than the presence ever had. She walked to the counter, poured herself another cup of tea, and tried to steady her hands. The cup trembled slightly, the spoon clinking against the porcelain. It was not the first time she had been dismissed or made to feel small. Society had a habit of doing that to older women. When she turned 60, people had stopped asking about her plans and started asking about her retirement. As if her usefulness had an expiration date, she had smiled politely through all of it. But this, being excluded from her own son's wedding, was different. It wasn't about age or appearance. It was about being told she no longer belonged. That realization hurt more than she could admit. Helen sat down again, the photo of her wedding still beside her. She studied the young woman she used to be. There had been hope in that girl's eyes, an open belief that family meant forever. She could barely recognize herself in that image now. The waves outside grew louder as the wind picked up. Light began to creep across the water, turning it from gray to pale blue. She watched the sunrise reflect off the surface like a mirror of fire, and in that glow, something inside her shifted. For the first time since the call, she allowed herself to feel the full weight of her anger. Not the kind that screamed or broke things, but the quiet, precise kind that builds resolve. She realized that if she stayed silent, if she accepted this humiliation with grace, she would be confirming exactly what Chloe believed about her. She was not going to be erased quietly. Helen reached for her notebook, the one she used for grocery lists and reminders. She flipped it open to a blank page. The paper smelled faintly of salt and pencil shavings. She wrote a single line in neat, deliberate handwriting. "You cannot control the story if you refuse to tell it." She stared at the words for a long time, then nodded slowly. There would be no tears. Not anymore. Tears had their place, but not today. Today was for remembering who she was. A teacher, a mother, a woman who had built a life out of loss and kept standing. She closed the notebook, her decision made, even if she didn't yet know what form it would take. She would respond, but not with bitterness. She would do it with intelligence, precision, and the kind of quiet strength that had carried her through every heartbreak before. The clock ticked softly, the room filled with golden light. Helen looked once more at the torn space on her refrigerator, the missing invitation, and whispered, "I'm not done yet." Then she stood, her back straight, her hands steady. The ocean roared louder outside, as if agreeing. It was no longer just a background sound. It was a call to action, the beginning of something she had yet to name, but could already feel rising within her. She poured the rest of her tea down the sink, opened her laptop, and began to plan. Marianne arrived just after lunch, her car tires crunching over the gravel driveway. Helen heard the familiar slam of the car door and smiled despite herself. Her sister never entered a room quietly. There was always a kind of energy that followed her, a spark that seemed to draw the air toward her. Helen met her at the porch, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Tell me it isn't true," Marianne said without a greeting. She was wearing dark jeans, a linen shirt, and her signature red lipstick, the kind that announced confidence long before she spoke. Her hair was a silver storm of curls pulled back with a pen. Helen sighed. "It's true." Marianne stared at her, disbelief flashing across her face. "That girl told you not to come to your own son's wedding?" "Not in so many words. She said my presence would make things uncomfortable." Marianne's eyes widened. "Uncomfortable? After everything you've done for that boy? I should have known Chloe was trouble the minute I saw her wear white to Thanksgiving dinner." Helen tried to smile. "Maybe it was just a misunderstanding." "Please," Marianne said, stepping inside. "You always try to see the good in people. That's your problem. Mine is the opposite. The sisters stood in the small kitchen, sunlight slanting through the lace curtains. The smell of coffee lingered in the air. Marianne reached for the pot without asking, poured herself a cup, and sat down at the table like she had lived there all her life. "Start from the beginning," she said. Helen told her everything, every word of the phone call, every pause, every careful justification Evan had used to soften the blow. Marianne listened, her eyes darkening. She didn't interrupt, but Helen could see her sister's knuckles tightening around the cup. When Helen finished, Marianne let out a long, slow breath. "That girl doesn't know who she's dealing with." "Marianne, don't," Helen said softly. "It's not worth a fight." "Oh, it's not a fight I'm thinking about," Marianne replied. "It's a reckoning." Helen gave her a look, half warning, half curiosity. "You always talk like you're still chasing headlines." "Some stories deserve to be chased," Marianne said, "and this one sounds like it has a villain who's gotten a little too comfortable." Helen couldn't help laughing. "You've been watching too many detective shows." Marianne leaned forward, elbows on the table. "You know what I think. I think Chloe is hiding something. Nobody tries that hard to control every detail unless they're afraid of something slipping out." Helen hesitated. "You really believe that?" Marianne reached into her bag and pulled out a small blue notebook. It was worn around the edges, the pages filled with tight handwriting and newspaper clippings. Helen recognized it immediately. It was the same notebook Marianne had carried for years when she worked as an investigative reporter. "I've kept this thing since the day I left the paper," Marianne said, flipping it open. "Old habits die hard. I still take notes when something feels off." Helen smiled faintly. "You and your notebook of truth." "It's not truth," Marianne corrected. "It's curiosity with good timing." She began to jot something down. "Let's start with what we know. Chloe Summers, 28, marketing job, polished, ambitious, likes control, probably has a weakness somewhere." Helen folded her arms. "You sound like you're about to launch an exposé." Marianne looked up from her notes. "I'm not talking about publishing anything. I'm talking about protecting you, protecting Evan, even if he doesn't realize he needs it." Helen felt a warmth in her chest. "You always were the wild one. And you were always the patient one. That's why we balance each other out." Marianne took a sip of coffee, her expression softening. "You've spent your whole life cleaning up after people, Helen. It's time someone stood up for you." Helen leaned back in her chair, letting the words settle. She wanted to protest, to say she didn't need anyone to fight her battles, but the truth was, she felt exhausted. There was something comforting about knowing someone else was angry on her behalf. "What do you plan to do?" Helen asked carefully. "Nothing reckless," Marianne said with a small grin. "Just a little observation, a few questions, maybe a friendly visit to Chloe's office downtown." Helen frowned. "Marianne, you can't." "Relax. I'm not going to storm in with a camera. I'll just have a look around. Call it instinct." Helen sighed. "Your instincts got you banned from 3 city council meetings." "And got me 2 awards," Marianne shot back. Then her tone softened. "Helen, listen to me. You've been quiet your whole life because you thought dignity meant silence, but sometimes silence just lets other people write your story for you." Helen looked down at the blue notebook on the table. The afternoon light caught its cover, making the worn leather gleam. It reminded her of the journal she used to keep when Daniel was alive, the one filled with hopes and plans that now seemed like relics of another life. "You really think this will help?" she asked. Marianne reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "I think finding the truth always helps. Maybe not right away, but eventually." The room fell quiet, except for the ticking of the old wall clock. Outside, the wind had picked up again, brushing the tops of the seagrass that bordered the yard. Helen felt something inside her shift again, a mixture of fear and curiosity. Marianne had always been her opposite, impulsive, fearless, allergic to caution. Yet right now, Helen was grateful for that difference. "All right," she said finally. "If you're going to do this, be careful." Marianne smiled. "Careful is my middle name." Helen laughed softly. "No, it isn't." "Fine," Marianne admitted. "But I promise I'll be smart about it." She closed her notebook with a snap and tucked it back into her bag. "I'll call you tomorrow." As she stood to leave, Helen followed her to the porch. The sunlight had turned golden, scattering across the water in ripples. Marianne turned back, eyes bright with determination. "Don't lose heart, Helen," she said. "Some people need to be reminded that mothers are not made of glass." Helen nodded, her throat tight. "Just be careful what you find." Marianne grinned. "If I find anything worth knowing, you'll be the first to hear." Then she got into her car, the blue notebook resting on the passenger seat beside her, its pages fluttering slightly in the breeze. Helen watched until the car disappeared down the road. For the first time in days, she felt something stir inside her that wasn't sadness. It was small, fragile, but unmistakably alive. Hope mixed with curiosity, and a quiet certainty that her sister was right. Whatever Chloe Summers was hiding, they were going to find it. And when they did, the truth would no longer belong to the bride who wanted perfection. It would belong to the mother who refused to disappear. The harbor light sat at the corner of Bay and Meeting, its windows fogged slightly from the heat of steamed milk and the weight of conversation. It was the kind of place where tourists lined up for cinnamon rolls and locals nursed secrets over black coffee. I chose a table near the back, close to the wall with the framed nautical maps. From there, I could see the door and most of the room reflected in a pane of glass that acted like a silent mirror. I had told myself I was simply out for tea. That was the lie I allowed in the morning so I could walk into the afternoon with a steadier spine. In truth, I had not stopped thinking about Marianne's blue notebook and the way she had said the word reckoning, as if it were not a threat, but a promise that dignity could be recovered by careful hands. The bell above the door sang once. I looked up without moving my head. Chloe stepped inside with the deliberate poise of a woman who understood how a room can be made to obey her. Pale linen dress, hair caught in a loose twist, smile already formed as if she had practiced it. She did not order. She scanned. Her gaze slid past the counter, past the chalkboard menu, past me. Then he entered. Taller than photographs can ever describe, shoulders square, a stride that ate the distance between them. He wore a fitted jacket over a gym shirt, and his face was the picture of private ease. Jason Reed. I knew his name within the minute because Marianne had taught me to read the quiet clues of a meeting, the way a barista greets a regular, the way a regular nods at a stranger, the speed with which a stranger acts like a friend. They did not kiss. They did not need to. Their hands found each other on the table between them, fingers touching lightly, drifting apart, then finding again as if pulled by a tide stronger than will. I felt the first sharp bite of anger then, not because Chloe was faithless in public, but because she had made me feel foolish for suspecting her lack of grace. The teacher in me took attendance of the little betrayals, the late arrivals to family dinners, the quick glances at her phone while Evan spoke, the way she called him Ev to trim him into something smaller. I set my cup down and slid my phone from my bag. My hands were steady. Years in the classroom had taught me how to look calm while storms gathered. I opened the camera and aligned the shot in the reflection of the glass. The cafe became a stage in reverse, a play watched through a pane of watercolor, a woman and a man, a private world built in a public room. They laughed. Chloe leaned in. Jason traced a circle on the table with one finger and she placed her hand over his to stop it. They spoke in the low, careful tone of conspirators. I could not hear the words, but I felt their shape. It was the language of permission given where no permission should exist. There is a moment when an ethic breaks. It is never loud. It is a soft rip in a seam, a thread pulled quietly, the sound of fabric parting when you think you are only smoothing it. I had spent 3 decades teaching children the difference between mistake and choice. A mistake is what happens when you do not yet know. A choice is what you make after you do. I kept recording. My reflection in the glass looked older than I felt, not fragile. weathered, like a pier that has taken every storm and remains. Part of me wanted to confront her right there, to say Evan's name and watch the mask crack. Another part knew that rage gives people a way to call you irrational. Evidence gives them no such gift. Jason reached across and brushed a curl from Chloe's cheek. She closed her eyes. For a heartbeat, the cafe fell away. The barista called out a latte. Someone laughed near the window. A spoon clinked against china. I recorded the small intimacy of a boundary ignored. I recorded the gravity of a choice repeated. The doorbell sang again. A woman with a stroller maneuvered past their table, and Chloe snatched her hand back as if it had touched flame. Her smile returned, brighter, almost brittle. Jason dropped his gaze and began to talk too fast. I watched them compose themselves into acquaintances. It was a performance. It was a practice they had rehearsed more than once. I finished my tea and stood. The mirror gave me one last image of the two of them. I pocketed my phone and walked out into the Charleston sunlight. The air carried the scent of pluff mud and magnolia. Boats shifted on their lines at the marina. My heart beat hard and even. It felt like beginning again, but not in the sense of youth. It felt like the beginning of a lesson I had taught 1,000 times and was finally prepared to apply to my own life. I did not call Marianne until I reached the promenade. Pelicans dipped and rose over the harbor. Children chased each other around a bench, and a couple posed for a photograph against the water. When my sister answered, I could hear traffic and music in the background, the orchestra of her lively life. "Well," she said, skipping the hello. "Tell me you found what we both suspected." "I found enough," I replied. "Harbor Light, noon. His name is Jason Reed." She whistled softly. "Give me the spelling." R-E-E-D. Trainer. Married. 2 children. If he is who I think he is, his gym is 3 blocks from Chloe's office. "God help me, I love being right," Marianne murmured. Then her voice softened. "Are you all right, Helen?" I looked at the water until the sun flashed silver in my eyes. I thought I would feel ruined. I feel clear. Good. Clarity is the only clean blade. I ended the call and watched a sailboat lean into the wind. It surprised me how calm I felt. Not satisfied. This was not victory. It was alignment. The world had tilted without my consent. Now it had clicked into place. On my walk home, I replayed the scene in the cafe, the little touches, the secret smiles, the way Chloe turned secrecy into a lovely gesture. Once, long ago, I might have tried to excuse it. She is young. She is stressed. She is afraid of the ceremony and looking for a distraction from the pressure of perfection. That was the vocabulary of the old Helen, the one who padded every sharp truth with soft explanations. The new one had no appetite for gentle lies. Back at the house, I placed my phone on the table and watched the video on a larger screen. The cafe lights glowed warm over their heads. The reflection kept my presence ghosted in the corner, a watcher in a separate world. I trimmed the edge of the clip, lifted the exposure slightly, added timestamps. The small work steadied me. Teachers learn to tame chaos by ordering papers and arranging desks. This felt similar and entirely different. I was not tidying a classroom. I was taking custody of my own story. I saved the file to a folder I named simply Harbor. Then I opened a new document and wrote notes in a neat column. Time of arrival. Positioning in the room. Physical signals that indicate intimacy. I numbered each, then listed questions beneath. How long has this been happening? Who else might know? What other places would feel safe to them? I thought about the schedule of a woman who loves control. Patterns appear when people believe they can hide in plain sight. The sun slid lower. The room grew quiet in the way rooms do when light withdraws. I set the phone beside the framed photo of Evan at 6. I traced the glass with 2 fingers. I refused to let this harden me against my son. I refused to mistake his blindness for malice. Love can be a veil. It is not a crime to wear it. It is a tragedy to never lift it. Night gathered fully before I moved again. I made a simple dinner and ate it standing at the counter. The ocean sounded closer in the dark, as if the water had crept up the beach to listen. I cleaned the dishes, wiped the table, and returned to my notes. By the time I closed the laptop, a plan had taken shape within me. Not revenge, not spectacle, proof. Proof is a lantern that turns rumor into fact and fear into action. I went to bed and left the window cracked. The salt air touched my face and the curtains breathed in and out like the chest of a sleeping child. I thought of the children in Jason Reed's house. I thought of the vows my son had not yet spoken. I thought of the young woman I once was, the one in the wedding photo, and how she would have wanted me to choose courage over bitterness. In the morning, I would begin in earnest. The harbor light had offered the first glance behind the curtain. There would be other places, other moments, other chances to record what needed to be known. I would move carefully. I would move with purpose. I would gather the truth the way a tide gathers shells along the shore, and when the time came, the right eyes would see it. I turned off the lamp. The room darkened to a gentle blue. Somewhere in the distance, a bell rang on the water. I closed my eyes and let the sound carry me forward into the next day, into the work of a mother who had been told to be silent and had chosen instead to begin. And by Monday night, the air felt charged, as if the wind off the harbor carried a secret. Marianne spread a city map across my kitchen table and anchored the corners with coffee mugs. Her blue notebook lay open beside it, a fountain pen tucked into the spine. I placed Daniel's silver watch between us. The crystal had a tiny scratch at the edge, a flaw I loved because it proved the thing had lived. "We start simple," Marianne said. "Routine is a person's unguarded truth." Tuesday came bright and hot. I parked across from Chloe's building at 11:30, a shaded spot under a live oak whose branches draped the sidewalk like a curtain. Marianne sat in the passenger seat with the window cracked, the blue notebook on her knees. We did not talk much. Talking invites doubt. Watching invites clarity. At 12:15, Chloe left the office with 2 co-workers and returned with them at 1:30, just as the receptionist had told Marianne over the phone. At 2:40, she appeared again, alone this time. She checked her phone, glanced up and down the street, then slipped back inside. We waited. At 3:14, I wound Daniel's watch out of habit, the soft click calm in my ear. At 3:15, she exited the side door and moved quickly toward the corner. "Mark it," Marianne murmured, already writing. 3:15, Tuesday. I pressed record before I stepped out of the car. No confrontation, only distance and the steady focus of a lens. Chloe turned left on King Street, then right on Fulton, and kept walking with that precise gait I had come to recognize. She did not look back, she did not hurry, the confidence of a practiced path. We followed half a block behind, then a full block. I learned the choreography quickly. Let a delivery truck create cover. Pause to study a window display when she pauses at a crosswalk. Lift the phone only when a pane of glass offers a reflection. On Maple Street, she slowed. Unit numbers rose along the brick facade like a calendar. She stopped at a black door with a brass plate that read 206. 2 quick knocks. The door opened. Jason stood there in a gray t-shirt, hair damp, a towel thrown over his shoulder. He glanced up the hall, pulled her in, and closed the door. I turned off the camera. For a moment my hands shook, then steadied. I think grief has a muscle memory. It trembles, then it braces. I looked at Daniel's watch. 3:21. Marianne exhaled slowly. There it is. "We do nothing today," I said. "We do nothing but record," she agreed. We returned to the car and drove away without speaking. The video was short, but it was unambiguous. It lived now in a folder I titled Maple. I watched it twice that evening, not because I needed to be convinced, but because I needed to grow acquainted with a new reality. I kept the volume low and the lights off and counted the seconds between the knock and the door opening. The watch ticked on the table beside me, a steady mouth that would not stop speaking. Thursday, we began earlier. Patterns are not habits until they repeat. I wanted repetition. I wanted the kind of dull certainty that leaves no room for charm. At noon, Chloe stepped out to lunch. At 1:30, she returned. At 2:40, she reappeared for a moment, as if testing the air. At 3:15, she took the side door again and walked the same route, her shoulders loose, her head bent slightly as if thinking about nothing at all. This time, Marianne took the lead. She crossed the street a few seconds after Chloe, then entered a florist shop and bought a single stem of white stock. It was an old reporter's trick, she told me later. Carry something that gives your presence an explanation. People question a body with empty hands. They ignore one with a purpose. I stayed on the opposite sidewalk, using storefront windows as my mirrors. I caught the arc of Chloe's arm as she reached for the brass plate. I captured the quick glance she threw over her shoulder before she knocked. I filmed the door cracking open, Jason's profile, his hand at her back. The frame wavered for half a second when my breath stuttered. Then I fixed it and held steady. We waited an hour in the car with the engine off. The heat pressed against the glass. I charted minutes on the face of Daniel's watch and thought about time as a quiet accomplice. At 4:23, the door opened again. Chloe stepped out first, hair smoothed, dress straightened. Jason followed, locked the door, and kissed her cheek. It was not romantic. It was ownership disguised as courtesy. I filmed it all. Marianne scribbled another line in the notebook. Tuesday, Thursday, same time, same door. We drove to the waterfront and parked where the breeze could find us. The relief of the wind felt like a benediction. Marianne closed the notebook and rested her hand on it as if blessing the small blue thing for its service. "How do you feel?" she asked. I surprised myself with the answer. "Capable." We watched the harbor traffic tilt and correct. Sailboats crossed each other like sharpened quills. Pelicans skimmed the water and rose again with small silver testimonies in their beaks. I thought about testimony. I thought about the difference between rumor and proof, between suspicion and knowledge. Knowledge can be a burden. It is also a key. Back at the house, I arranged the evidence until it told a clean story. Tuesday at 3:15, Chloe leaves. Tuesday at 3:21, she enters Unit 206. Thursday at 3:15, the same. Thursday at 4:23, exit. I added timestamps to each clip and entered them in a spreadsheet. The act felt strangely holy, as if I were laying stones across a river for someone else to cross. I set the phone beside Daniel's watch and let my hand rest on the cool metal. This was the man who had taught our son to ride a bike on the quiet street behind the house. This was the man who believed in honor as a practice, not a posture. I imagined him sitting at the table with me, studying the files, and I felt no shame. I felt aligned with the best of what we had promised each other. That night, I slept lightly and woke early. Friday was for silence. I taught children for 3 decades. I know when to step back and let a lesson do its work. The certainty that had replaced doubt did not feel like triumph. It felt like a steel cord tightening down my spine, like a ship's line going taut before a storm. At breakfast, Marianne poured coffee and looked at me over the rim of her mug. "We have what we need," she said. "We have enough to stop lying to ourselves," I replied. She nodded. "What now?" "Now I prepare," I said. "Not for theater. For truth." I slipped Daniel's watch onto my wrist and listened for the first time in years to the comfort of its tick against my skin. I understood suddenly why I had kept it hidden for so long. I had been afraid that listening to it would make me long for what could never return. Instead, it taught me something else. Time is not a thief if you ask it the right questions. It can be a witness. I turned to the window. The tide was coming in, the foam licking the edge of the lawn. I drew the curtains wider and let the light pour into the room. The videos waited on my laptop, small and silent and impossible to refute. I was no longer a mother guessing in the dark. I was a woman holding a lantern. When I closed the computer, the decision inside me clicked into place. I would not shout. I would not plead. I would not ask for permission to defend my own dignity. The next part of this story would require careful steps and a steady hand. I could give it both. Outside, the wind shifted, and the chimes on the porch rang once, a clear note that made the hairs rise on my arms. I thought of Tuesday. I thought of Thursday. I thought of the door with the brass plate and the way it opened for Chloe without a pause. Then I thought of a different door, the one I would open myself, the one that led out of fear and into the narrow, bright hallway of truth. The night I decided to create Sarah Fields, the house felt unnaturally quiet. The ocean was still, as if it too had paused to listen. I sat at the kitchen table with the lamp on low, Daniel's watch beside me, and Marianne's blue notebook open to a clean page. The idea had begun as a whisper earlier that evening while I reviewed the footage. It grew louder each time I replayed Chloe's hand brushing Jason's shoulder, each time I heard the echo of Evan's voice thanking me for understanding. Sarah Fields. The name came from nowhere, yet it sounded like someone people would trust. Simple. Grounded. The kind of woman who might photograph weddings and post soft-spoken truths about love and integrity. I typed it into the sign-up form as if I were filling in a birth certificate. Within hours, the new account had a profile picture, a stock photo of a camera resting on a windowsill, sunlight spilling across it. The bio read, photographer, storyteller, believer that love and truth should never be strangers. I began posting that same night. A series of photos I had taken years earlier filled the feed. A couple holding hands on the boardwalk, a child offering a seashell to the tide, an empty bench after rain. I wrote short captions beneath each one about honesty, loyalty, and the quiet strength of forgiveness. Words I meant. Words no one would suspect came from a woman plotting to expose a lie. By the third day, Sarah Fields had gained her first 5,000 followers. By the fifth, 20,000. People shared her posts, quoting her lines about transparency in relationships and the courage it takes to face uncomfortable truths. The irony was not lost on me. Marianne called each evening to ask for updates. "You've always had a knack for storytelling," she said. "Now you're using it for justice." "I'm not sure justice is the right word," I answered. "I think of it as balance." She laughed softly. "Whatever helps you sleep." But I did not sleep much that week. My dreams were filled with light and noise, the flicker of video frames, the shifting faces of those I had taught, loved, and lost. The work steadied me. I edited during the day, adjusting color, cleaning audio, timing cuts with the precision of a surgeon. Each frame of Chloe's smile became a brushstroke in a portrait of deception. The opening of the video was gentle. Soft piano music, a montage of Charleston in golden light, the harbor, the dunes, the church steeples rising like old promises. Then came the title, When Love Forgets the Truth. The first minute showed a bride walking down an aisle, radiant and adored. The camera lingered on the lace of her dress, the shimmer of sunlight on her veil. Chloe looked almost holy. A voiceover followed, warm and calm, the kind Sarah Fields might use. I recorded it myself with the microphone on my laptop. Every love story begins with faith, but faith without truth is only theater. At the 30-second mark, I split the screen. On the left, Chloe and Evan exchanged vows. On the right, she leaned across a cafe table toward Jason Reed. The contrast was devastating. The soundtrack shifted to the faint hum of a cafe, the scrape of a cup, then silence. The next sequence cut between two realities. Chloe in the wedding rehearsal laughing with bridesmaids, Chloe stepping into the black door on Maple Street. The color palette shifted from soft golds to the cold blue of afternoon shadows. Every edit carried purpose, every transition a verdict. Halfway through, I placed the words of her vows over the image of her betrayal. Her voice filled the frame. "I promise to honor you, to cherish you, to be faithful always." At the word faithful, the footage froze on Jason's hand against her back. I let the stillness linger until the music returned, slow and mournful. When I finished the first cut, the video ran just over 6 minutes. Watching it made me feel both hollow and powerful. This was not rage, it was truth rendered visible. Marianne came over that night to review it. She watched without speaking, her pen tapping lightly against her knee. When it ended, she exhaled and said, "It's a masterpiece, cold, clean, unarguable." "I don't want spectacle," I said. "I want understanding." "You want her to answer for what she's done," she corrected. I did not deny it. "And I want Evan to see her as she truly is." Marianne nodded slowly. "Then Sarah Fields will help him do that." By the weekend, Sarah Fields had become a voice people quoted. Her post titled, "The Cost of Silence," went viral. When good people stay quiet, cruelty learns to whisper sweetly. In the comments, strangers wrote about their own betrayals, their own discoveries. The community forming beneath each post surprised me. What began as strategy became something larger, a shared hunger for honesty in a world addicted to illusion. That was when I realized the power of the story I was crafting. It was no longer just about one woman's deceit. It was about the quiet dismissal of people like me, the older generation told to smile, to accept, to step aside gracefully. I rewrote the video's ending to reflect that truth. After the final image of Chloe and Jason together, the screen faded to black and the words appeared. When you erase someone's dignity, the truth will find another way to speak. Then came the closing voiceover. My voice. Lower now, steadier. If you have ever watched someone good be mistreated, do not stay silent. Sometimes the only way to keep your dignity is to tell the truth. The upload took less than a minute. The internet, I knew, would do the rest. I left the computer on and walked to the porch. The moon had risen above the water, painting a silver road across the sea. I held Daniel's watch in my palm and listened to its steady rhythm. Each tick was a reminder that time exposes what pride hides. I whispered the name Sarah Fields into the dark. It no longer felt like an alias, it felt like a purpose. Inside, the laptop chimed softly. Notifications began to appear in the corner of the screen. Likes, shares, comments. The first ripples of something vast and unstoppable. I stood at the window and watched the light flicker on my face. It was not the glow of revenge. It was the reflection of truth finding its audience. By midnight, Sarah Fields had 27,000 followers. By dawn, 40,000. The post, "When Love Forgets the Truth," had been shared across platforms, translated, reposted, and dissected. Marianne called early. "Have you seen it? It's everywhere." "I've seen enough," I replied. My voice was calm, my heart surprisingly quiet. Outside, the sea was beginning to rise with the morning tide. The water glimmered like new glass. For the first time in weeks, I felt lighter, though I knew the hardest part was still ahead. The world had met Sarah Fields, the storyteller of truth in love. And behind her, unseen but entirely awake, stood Helen Whitaker, a mother who had refused to be erased. The morning of the wedding arrived bright and unbroken, the kind of day travel magazines promise and life rarely delivers. The Charleston sun stretched across the horizon, warm and gold, brushing over the water like a hand smoothing silk. The sea was calm, the air clear, and somewhere on the beach below the resort, 100 white chairs waited for a celebration built on a lie. I parked 3 blocks away from the venue, close enough to hear the faint rhythm of music carried by the breeze. My clothes were simple, a navy sundress, sandals, and a wide hat that shaded my face. Around my neck hung a camera, the kind favored by travel photographers who wander coastlines searching for beauty. To anyone else, I was just another woman capturing the light. Inside, I was a storm contained within calm. The resort buzzed with activity. Guests in pastel linen greeted one another with practiced delight. Waiters passed trays of champagne. Every detail gleamed with control, from the pale roses arranged in perfect symmetry to the white aisle runner that stretched toward the tide. I moved carefully among the clusters of guests, my camera raised. No one questioned my presence. A woman with a camera belongs everywhere and nowhere. From the public access path behind a row of sea oats, I found my vantage point. The ceremony would begin at 4 o'clock sharp. I checked my equipment, adjusted the lens, and turned Daniel's silver watch on my wrist until the reflection caught the sunlight. It was 5 minutes to the hour. Then I saw them. Evan stood at the altar, nervous and radiant. His suit was white, his smile unguarded, the same boyish curve I had seen 1,000 times in childhood photographs. The sight of him stole the air from my lungs. For a fleeting moment, I wished none of this were real, that I could step from the shadows and take his hand, whisper that everything would be all right. But the truth stood taller than my wish. Chloe appeared from the veranda, the wind lifting her veil just enough to reveal her face. She was flawless in the way a photograph is flawless, composed, edited, distant. Her bridesmaids followed like pastel shadows. Guests turned in unison, phones rose, music swelled. I began to record. Through the camera, everything became sharper. The lens does not forgive. It notices the flicker of nerves, the hesitation of a smile, the way eyes move when they are searching for something not in front of them. As Chloe walked down the aisle, her gaze darted briefly toward the rows of guests, scanning for a familiar face. Then she looked farther to the edge of the beach where the public path met the dunes. Her expression softened, almost imperceptibly, like a signal caught and returned. Jason Reed stood there, his hands in his pockets, sunglasses hiding what did not need to be seen. I captured that too, the smallest betrayal disguised as stillness. The officiant spoke of love, of vows and unity. I focused the camera on their hands as they joined, the gold of their rings glinting against the ocean light. I filmed every frame of the promise she made, knowing each word would soon be paired with the truth she had buried. When they kissed, the crowd erupted in applause. The moment shimmered like glass. Later, at the reception in the ballroom, I slipped through the side entrance with a crowd of guests. Nobody questioned the woman with the camera. The chandeliers cast soft light across tables of white linen and crystal glasses. The band played old jazz tunes, and laughter drifted like perfume. I recorded it all. The first dance, the way Evan looked at her as if she were salvation, and the way she smiled back too quickly, too bright, the smile of someone aware she was being watched. At one point, she turned toward the door that led to the terrace. I followed her gaze. Jason was there again, lingering by the bar, speaking to a waiter, his face partially shadowed. Chloe's hand trembled slightly as she raised her glass. She looked away, then back again. That single flicker told me everything. The performance was cracking, even before the curtain had fallen. By 10 o'clock, the dancing had softened into the blur of exhaustion. I slipped away unnoticed, my camera bag heavy against my shoulder. The ocean wind had turned cooler. The resort lights shimmered in the distance like a mirage. I drove home through the quiet streets, the tide rolling in beside me like applause fading after a show. Inside the house, I brewed tea and set my camera on the table. I watched the footage from start to finish. It was hauntingly beautiful, the sunset, the vows, the laughter, and underneath, a second story pulsed. A woman smiling into the eyes of the man she had already betrayed. A sun too kind to see it. I opened my laptop. The screen glowed against the dark. Sarah Field's account waited, alive with anticipation. I imported the new clips, blending them with the earlier footage, the cafe meeting, the Maple Street apartment, the touch of Jason's hand against her back. The result was merciless in its precision. On one side, the ceremony unfolded, all white silk and golden light. On the other, the shadows of deceit. The transitions were seamless. The rhythm of Chloe's vows overlapped perfectly with her whispered laughter in another man's ear. It was art, and it was justice. At the end, I added one line across the screen in clean white text. When you uninvite a mother, truth finds another way. I uploaded the video. The progress bar crept forward, a thin strip of silver across black. When it reached 100%, I sat back and folded my hands around Daniel's watch. Outside, the sea was rising. By morning, the video had passed 2 million views. My phone pulsed with notifications. Thousands of comments flooded in, strangers writing about loyalty, about forgiveness, about betrayal. Some praised Sarah Fields for exposing dishonesty. Others debated the ethics of revealing private sin. But beneath every argument was the same truth. People recognized themselves in the story. Marianne called it dawn. Her voice carried both awe and warning. It's everywhere, Helen. The news, the blogs, the forums. You started a storm. No, I said quietly. I uncovered one that already existed. She hesitated. And Evan? I closed my eyes. He will see it soon enough. As I stood by the window, the morning light spilled over the ocean. For the first time, it felt less like the beginning of a day and more like the end of an era. The tide had reached the steps of the porch, pulling gently at the sand, as if the sea itself wished to cleanse what had been buried there. The truth was no longer mine alone. It belonged to the world now, reflected in every screen, whispered across every timeline. The wedding had been perfect, the lie had been flawless. But perfection cannot survive exposure, and the world had finally seen behind the veil. By Sunday morning, Charleston had turned into a city of whispers. Every news feed carried the same headline: "Viral wedding video exposes bride's secret affair." The thumbnail was an image I recognized instantly: Chloe's frozen smile beside my son, the ocean behind them. For a few seconds I simply stared, unable to decide whether I felt satisfaction or sorrow. The story had grown far beyond my control. Talk shows debated the morality of public exposure. Journalists hunted for the mysterious photographer, Sarah Fields, whose post had ignited a nationwide conversation about betrayal and transparency. Words like truth, justice, and revenge floated through the headlines, each one trying to name what had happened. None of them felt right. I turned off the television and let the silence return. The world was loud enough without my help. By mid-morning, someone knocked on the door. When I opened it, a woman stood there holding a paper bag from the bakery on King Street. Her hands trembled as she offered a weak smile. "Mrs. Whitaker?" I nodded. "My name is Laura Reed." The name landed like a stone in my chest. Jason's wife. Her face was drawn, eyes swollen from hours of tears. Yet beneath the exhaustion was something else, a fragile strength, the kind that blooms only when illusion has burned away. I stepped aside and gestured her in. She hesitated before entering, as though crossing the threshold meant crossing into another version of herself. The air between us felt heavy with things both of us understood but had not yet spoken. "Would you like some tea?" I asked quietly. She nodded. "Please." In the kitchen, I filled the kettle and set 2 cups on the table. The familiar ritual steadied me. When I turned back, Laura had removed her sunglasses. Without the armor of dark glass, her face looked younger, almost painfully human. "I wasn't sure if I should come," she said, "but after seeing the video, I had to." She clasped her hands together. "For months, I thought I was losing my mind. Jason started working late, then disappearing entirely on Tuesdays and Thursdays. He said clients wanted private sessions at the studio. I tried to believe him." Her voice cracked. "He told me I was paranoid, that I was imagining things." I sat across from her, the steam from the kettle filling the room. "I'm sorry," I said softly. "No," she whispered. "Don't be. You didn't destroy anything. You just turned the lights on." The words hit me harder than I expected. I poured the tea, watching the liquid swirl. She reached into her purse and pulled out a folded paper. "I filed for divorce this morning. My lawyer says the video is admissible evidence." Her hand shook as she unfolded the paper. "It's strange, isn't it? The thing that broke my heart also saved me." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The wind from the sea pressed faintly against the windows. Then Laura looked at me directly. I wanted to thank you. I think I needed to see it like that to realize I wasn't crazy, that the unease I felt wasn't a flaw but a signal. Her voice softened. It must have been hard for you too. I met her gaze. It was. She nodded slowly. You lost something too, didn't you? Yes, I said. The illusion that my son's life was safe in someone else's hands. Laura stared down at her cup. You did the right thing, maybe not the easy thing, but the right one. I'm not sure right and easy have ever met, I replied. Her mouth lifted into the smallest smile. I think you're right about that. We sat in silence for a while, two women bound by the same betrayal. There was no triumph in the air, only a quiet ache. I keep wondering, she said finally, how long he would have kept lying if you hadn't acted. Maybe forever. People can hide from the world, I said, but not from truth. It waits, it always waits. Laura looked around my kitchen, the bookshelves filled with old lesson plans, the framed photo of Evan as a boy, the chipped teacup Daniel had once glued back together for me. You seem like someone who's seen a lot of storms, she said. I smiled faintly. You survive one by learning how to anchor. She finished her tea and stood. Thank you again. You gave me the one thing I thought I'd lost forever, clarity. As she turned to go, I touched her arm gently. Take care of yourself, Laura, and your children. I will. She hesitated, then added, You did what every mother wishes she had the courage to do. When the door closed behind her, I stood for a long time, staring at the place where she had been. Outside, the afternoon light flickered against the window pane like water reflecting through glass. I felt both relief and an ache I could not name. I walked back to the table and picked up Daniel's watch. Its ticking filled the room, each second a soft reminder that truth, once revealed, never stops moving. I turned the face toward me and whispered, We did what was necessary. Later that evening, Marianne arrived with her usual restless energy. She tossed her bag on the chair and studied me. You look like someone who's been through a war. Maybe I have, I said. The world is eating up the story, she told me. Every outlet is talking about Sarah Fields, the mystery woman who exposed a wedding built on lies. I closed my eyes for a moment. It feels strange hearing it described that way. You did something remarkable, Marianne said, but I can see it's costing you. I looked at her. I'm not happy that anyone's been ruined, Marianne. I just wanted fairness for Evan, for the truth, for myself. She sat down and took my hand. Justice always leaves ashes behind. But from ashes, something honest grows. I thought of Laura's tear-streaked face, of the calm in her voice when she said thank you. I thought of Evan, still unaware that the story spreading through the world would soon reach him. The victory tasted like saltwater, sharp, cleansing, and impossible to swallow without pain. That night, I stepped outside onto the porch. The tide was high, the waves brushing the edge of the grass. The moon hung low, pale and solemn. I could feel the hum of the city in the distance, the sound of countless screens replaying the same 6 minutes that had changed everything. I whispered into the wind, Let this be enough. The waves answered with their steady rhythm, neither forgiving nor cruel. Just constant, like truth itself. The knock came late in the afternoon, when the light had turned soft and golden, the hour that makes even old houses seem forgiving. I had not been expecting anyone. The world had been quiet that day, a kind of pause after the storm of attention. When I opened the door, Chloe stood there. She looked nothing like the bride from the beach. Her hair was pulled back carelessly, her skin pale beneath oversized sunglasses, and her hands clutched the strap of her purse as if it were the only thing keeping her upright. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The waves broke somewhere beyond the dunes, their rhythm too calm for what passed between us. Mrs. Whitaker, she said finally, her voice trembling, I need to talk to you. I stepped aside. Come in. She entered slowly, glancing around as though seeing the house for the first time. The air smelled faintly of salt and lemon polish. I led her to the kitchen, where 2 cups already waited on the counter. I had been planning to make tea for myself. It seemed right now to make enough for 2. "Sit," I said gently. She hesitated before lowering herself into the chair across from me. Her sunglasses hid her expression until she removed them, revealing eyes swollen and red. She looked younger that way, like a frightened girl caught in the act of growing up too quickly. "I'm sorry," she began. The words were soft, almost inaudible. I didn't know where else to go. I filled the kettle and let the sound of the rising water fill the silence. Then I turned to her. "What is it you want to say, Chloe?" She swallowed. "I know you probably hate me." I shook my head slowly. "I don't hate you. Hate is for people we still expect something from." That seemed to wound her more deeply than anger could have. She looked down at her hands. "I came to tell you the truth, even if it's too late." The kettle began to hum. I poured the boiling water over the tea leaves, the steam rising between us like a curtain of breath. Chloe's voice broke. "I didn't leave you off the guest list because I wanted to humiliate you. I did it because you scare me. You look at people and you see everything. You saw through me from the beginning, and I couldn't stand it." She pressed a hand to her forehead. "I thought if I kept you away, I could keep my secret, and maybe if the wedding happened, it would make everything right again. But I was lying to everyone, even myself." I placed the cup in front of her. She stared at it for a long time before wrapping her fingers around the porcelain. Her hands trembled so badly the tea rippled against the rim. "Chloe," I said softly, "people often fear the ones who hold up a mirror, but the mirror itself is not the enemy." Her eyes filled again. "Do you think I'm evil?" "No," I said. "I think you're lost. There's a difference." The answer seemed to unravel something in her. Tears came then, sudden and heavy, the kind that sound like confession. She bent forward, her shoulders shaking. "I destroyed everything. My marriage, my career, my reputation. I deserve the names people are calling me online." I let her cry. When she finally lifted her head, her voice was raw. I watched that video over and over. At first, I was furious. Then I realized it wasn't cruelty. It was truth. You didn't twist anything. You just showed what was already there. I met her gaze steadily. The truth doesn't destroy what's real. It only exposes what was never strong enough to last. Chloe wiped her face with the back of her hand. "I wish I could take it all back." "No one can go backward," I said. "But you can still choose what kind of woman you'll be tomorrow." Her lip trembled. "I don't even know who that is anymore." "That's the beginning," I told her. "Not knowing. That's where honesty starts." She looked down at her tea. "You should hate me." "I don't," I said again. "You made terrible choices, but hating you won't undo them. What matters now is what you do with the truth." She nodded weakly. "I'm starting therapy next week." "Real therapy this time, no pretending." "That's good," I said. "Learning to live without masks is harder than wearing them, but it's the only way forward." For a moment, silence returned, filled only by the sound of the sea outside. Then Chloe whispered, "When I first met you, I thought you were judging me, but you weren't. You were seeing me. I just didn't want to be seen." I took a slow breath. We all hide from the mirror at some point, but eventually we have to look. The reflection doesn't ask for perfection, only courage. Her tears started again, quieter this time. I reached across the table and touched her hand, just for a second. "Drink your tea," I said. "You'll feel better." She obeyed. The gesture was simple, ordinary. Yet it felt like something sacred had passed between us, the fragile peace that comes when guilt meets understanding. After a long while, she whispered, "I don't expect forgiveness." "Forgiveness isn't a gift you ask for," I said. "It's something time gives both of us, if we let it." She looked at me, surprised. "How can you be so calm?" "Because anger is heavy," I said, "and I've carried enough of it in my life." Chloe stared at her cup as if it contained answers. "Do you think Evan will ever forgive me?" "I think he will try," I said gently. "He has a kind heart. But forgiveness doesn't erase what's been done. It only makes it bearable." The clock on the wall ticked softly. Outside, the last light of evening filtered through the window, bathing the room in amber. She finished the last sip of tea and set the cup down carefully, as if it were something precious. "Thank you," she said, standing. "For not yelling, for listening, for seeing me." I rose with her. "Take care of yourself, Chloe. The truth has already hurt enough people. Let it start healing someone, even if that someone is you." She hesitated at the door, then turned. "You're a better woman than I'll ever be." I smiled faintly. "Be a better version of yourself instead. That's all the world needs from any of us." When she left, I stood for a long time watching her car disappear down the quiet street. The cup she had used sat cooling on the table, a thin trace of tea left at the bottom. I did not wash it, not yet. It wasn't forgiveness, not entirely. It was something quieter, something like release. I walked to the porch as the sky darkened and the tide crept higher. Somewhere beyond the dunes, the world was still buzzing with her name and mine. But here, there was only the sound of waves, the scent of salt, and the faint warmth of the tea that had bridged two women, one who had broken trust and one who had chosen not to break herself. And for the first time, I felt peace that was not born of victory, but of understanding. 3 months passed. The world, as it always does, moved on to new stories, new scandals, new noise. But the echo of wedding truth did not fade. It became more than a viral moment. It became a conversation. People argued about it on talk shows and podcasts. Professors discussed it in ethics lectures. Journalists called it a modern fable about honesty and consequence. What surprised me most was not the scale of the attention, but the tone of it. Amid the outrage and debate, there was also gratitude. I had not expected gratitude. Letters began to arrive in my mailbox, first in a trickle, then in stacks bound with rubber bands by the postal carrier who now greeted me by name. Some were written in careful cursive, others typed and printed from email threads. They came from women in retirement homes, single mothers, widows, even a few men who confessed that they too had stayed silent when silence was easier. One woman wrote, "You reminded me that I am not invisible." Another said, "Watching your video gave me courage to tell my daughter the truth about her father." I read every letter slowly, as if the paper might bruise under my fingers. The local news had called me several times asking for interviews, but I refused them all. The world did not need another headline. What it needed was quieter proof that truth can survive without spectacle. Evan had changed too. The first weeks after the wedding were difficult. Grief takes many disguises. There were mornings he sat on the porch staring at the horizon for hours, saying nothing. I let him sit. Some wounds mend only in silence. But one afternoon, I found him in the kitchen surrounded by cookbooks and notebooks, measuring flour into a bowl. He looked up with that same small smile he had as a child when caught doing something forbidden but harmless. "Thinking of starting something," he said. "What sort of something?" He wiped his hands on a towel. "A cooking class, for seniors mostly. A way to bring people together. I thought maybe we could host it at the community center." It was such a simple idea, yet it filled the room with light. 3 weeks later, the first class gathered in the recreation hall near the marina. 10 people showed up that first day, 8 women, 2 men, each carrying a story and an apron. I watched Evan guide them through the recipe for vegetable stew, patient and kind, the same way his father used to guide him through his first fishing lines. He smiled more freely now. The heaviness that once hung around him had lifted, replaced by something stronger and quieter: acceptance. Sometimes, while the class simmered into laughter and conversation, I helped in the back, organizing ingredients or washing dishes. People recognized me occasionally, whispering my name before approaching shyly to say thank you. I never knew how to answer, so I usually said, "The truth did most of the work, I only carried it." One Saturday morning, Evan invited me to help demonstrate an old family recipe, apple cinnamon pie, the same one my mother had taught me when I was 15. His new friend, Emily, a kind-hearted woman who worked at the local library, stood beside me, ready to learn. She had gentle eyes and a laugh that came easily, the kind of sound that heals instead of hurts. As we sliced the apples together, I felt something shift inside me, a soft recognition that life, even after ruin, still knows how to begin again. "Thin slices," I told her, "so the layers melt together." She nodded, concentrating. "Like the past and the present," she said. I smiled. "Exactly." When the pie was done, the scent of cinnamon filled the room. Everyone clapped as Evan carried it to the table. I served the first slice to Emily, then to Evan, then to the students who had already started asking for the recipe. "There's a secret to it," I said, handing out small cards with the ingredients written in my hand. "But it's not in the sugar or the spice, it's in remembering who taught you and why." Evan raised his fork. "Then this one tastes like home," he said. That night, when the house was quiet again, I sat at my desk reading the day's letters. One, from a woman in Oregon, stayed with me. "You made me realize that some truths are not meant to destroy," she wrote. "They're meant to free us." I looked at the cooling pie on the counter, half-eaten, and thought of how something so simple could hold so much meaning, a recipe carried through 3 generations, shared again under a roof filled with laughter instead of lies. There are secrets worth keeping, the way my husband used to hum while he worked, the lullabies I sang when Evan was small, the quiet promise I made to myself the night the phone call came uninviting me from the wedding. But there are other truths that should never stay hidden. The difference, I've learned, lies not in what we know, but in the courage it takes to speak. I turned off the lamp and looked out at the sea. The horizon glowed faintly, as if the ocean were keeping its own small lanterns alive for those still finding their way back to shore. Before I closed my notebook, I wrote one last line, a reminder to myself and to anyone who might someday read it. There are secrets worth sharing, and truths that must be revealed. The difference is courage. Then I looked into the camera on my desk, the same one that had once caught a bride's trembling smile, and recorded a new message for the channel. "My name is Helen Whitaker," I said quietly. "If this story has reminded you that truth still has value in our noisy world, tell us what it means to you. Leave a comment, share your story, and remember to subscribe for more tales that honor the strength within every final chapter. Because here, every ending is just another beginning." The red recording light blinked once, then faded. Outside, the tide rolled in steady and endless, carrying with it the promise that truth, no matter how painful, always finds its way home. Epilogue. The quiet power of truth. In the end, Helen Whitaker's story was never just about betrayal or revenge. It was about the quiet, unglamorous courage it takes to stand for truth when the world would rather look away. It was about a mother's love that refused to be erased, and a generation of women learning that dignity does not fade with age, it deepens. The waves outside her window kept their rhythm, the same way time does when life insists on beginning again. The video that once tore through the internet had long stopped trending, but its echo lived on in the letters, the voices, the strangers who whispered, "Thank you for reminding us that truth still matters." Helen continued teaching her small cooking class beside her son, her laughter soft but steady. The world had moved on, yet in every kitchen, every porch, every quiet evening where someone replayed her story, something small and human had changed. Maybe you've known a moment like hers, the one where silence felt safer than honesty, where love demanded you shrink instead of stand tall. Maybe you've been the one left out of the story, or the one who finally decided to write it yourself. If you have, then this story is yours too. Here at Grandma's final chapter, every tale we tell is a reminder that even the smallest truth can heal, connect, and set us free. So if Helen's journey touched your heart, If it reminded you of your own courage, take a moment to share your thoughts below. Tell us about the chapter you've lived, the one that taught you something worth passing on. And if you believe stories like this deserve to be heard, please like this video, share it with someone who needs a little light today, and subscribe to our channel. Because here, we honor the voices that refuse to disappear. Every ending we share is not a farewell, but a beginning one that reminds us that truth, kindness, and courage still have a place in this world. We'll see you in the next story.